I am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls. Prepare for Prattle. Shockphobia Fest.
Welcome to Prattle World. I'm your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider-Dan. And in this podcast, I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that a mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to another edition of Shockphobia Fest, a month-long celebration of All Hallows Eve's most frightening films and comic spooks. And this time, we're talking about the classic 1970s Marvel horror comic Tomb of Dracula and the rise of Marvel horror in general. So I wanted to talk about this for a little while. I thought that Halloween is the best time for this. And because there's been a lot of talk of Marvel horror quite recently, with the success of Immortal Hulk, Absolute Carnage, the announcement that Doctor Strange 2 will be Marvel's first fully fledged horror movie, as well as the upcoming Blade movie, Morbius movie, the possible casting of a female Ghost Rider, and the announcement of the Hellstrom TV series, which has been greenlit. Marvel's kind of having a horror renaissance, if you will. And I've invited one of my favourite comic book experts back onto the show. It is my friend and yours. It's Dennis Whittle.
Boo.
Boo. Boo. Hoo, 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 hoo,
Boo
hoo.
indeed. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Thank you. Expert. I like that.
You are an
I'm
expert.
I'm not an expert.
I believe you are.
I know stuff.
I mean, I believe I'm an expert, and if I'm saying you're an expert, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
And how are you this All Hallows Eve?
I'm a little bit sleepy.
A little sleepy.
A little bit sleepy.
It's not All Hallows Eve. We're recording this earlier than that, but
I'm always sleepy. So
we're in the spooky season, aren't we? The spooky
Yes.
season, and you're a bit tired. You're wearing your Sleepy Hollow hoodie as well.
Yes, from Sleepy Hollow.
Are you feeling a bit headless?
I feel like cutting some. Yes, I feel
Stressful day at work?
a little bit. Yeah,
A little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little
it's got better.
good.
It's got better.
Well, actually, before we get started, we've got a little bit of news to announce.
We have.
We have. We're not having a baby. No, I'm sorry.
It's a boy.
We are both going to Malta Comic Con.
We are going to Malta Comic Con.
What a trip this is going to be. I'm very excited. They've got so many cool comic book guests. I haven't had a holiday in over a year, so I'm really looking forward to it, even though it's kind of a working holiday. It's going to be really, really cool. And in November, I was going to have Robot Month, but that is no longer going to happen because all of the stuff I'm going to record at Malta is going to go on slowly but surely throughout November, leading up to the alternativity stories that I'm going to do in December. Another season of Christmas-themed podcasts coming up, so I'm really looking forward to all that, and I'm really glad to be going. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to come.
It'd be great. it's you're going to be interviewing all the guests.
Yes.
Taking part in panels.
Yes.
Eating and drinking.
Oh, I do like that. I do. That's my favourite bit, I think.
And mingling with the stars.
With the comic book royalty, the real rock stars of the comic book world.
And consuming your body's weight in pizza.
And Al Ewing's going to be there. And
Al's going to be there.
We definitely spoke to him at Oldham Comic Con. I got to interview him and do the panel as well. That was on this very channel. But he's an absolute star and he's an absolute diamond geezer when it comes to comic books and the world of the Hulk. He knows, more than anybody. He probably knows more than you and me combined.
Yeah, he likes the Hulk. He knows
really likes the Hulk
stuff.
And he's very much involved in the body horror element of that book as well. And another thing that's coming up is you're having another celebration at the shop at Comic Den.
Yes, we're having a annual Halloween fest type thing.
Yeah,
it's basically
it's another kind of Batman Day, isn't it?
Yeah, it's free horror comics, free Halloween comics, food and cake, which is
that's always the best bit. I honestly, I was scoffing last time as Hugo Strange. You'd never seen Hugo Strange scoff down so much cake.
Lots of funny people dressing up too, and Joker faces.
Joker faces, okay.
Which seems to be the theme.
All right, okay.
They say Joker faces. I'm just going to go, come as a clown.
Come as a clown.
You'd fit in well.
Yeah, I'm already a bit of a joker.
Yeah,
I'm a bit of a joke.
I wouldn't go that far. But lots of free comics. I think there's 25 titles.
Amazing.
And we also got a guest who's, I think if you go on the Facebook page, it's been announced. And
okay.
They will be signing their new book and giving away free art prints of horror type stuff.
Oh, amazing. And will there be discounts on horror books?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And we've got some very special stuff, which leads us into the thing about pre-code.
Yes.
Proper horror stuff. Before people got involved.
And again, before we start as well, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there at the Halloween Fest or the Comic Fest. Halloween Comic Fest,
I think it's called a Halloween Comic Fest.
Halloween Comic Fest. So I'll be there picking up. I'm going to pick up my Batman Vampire book and my Joker by John Carpenter.
Yes.
Pick up those books.
Which is very good.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm so. I heard something about toxic masculinity or something about it.
It's very John Carpenter.
Good. That's what I want. That's what I want. Because I liked his take on his comic book with Big Trouble in Little China. That was really good. And all of his other sort of comic book stuff's really good as well. Can't wait. And we are also doing a competition together.
We are doing the competition.
We are doing the competition, and you have picked one of the Marvel horror titles that we're going to be talking about today, and some of those kind of characters. You picked out a book that we are going to give away. All you have to do, if you've not done it already, is like the Comic Den. So it's Oldham's Comic Den on Facebook. You can find it on one of the posts on my social medias if you're struggling to find it. And all you have to do is share that post or retweet it, whatever we do nowadays with social medias, and use the hashtag #PrepareForPrattle. And then me and Den will decide, after a bit of cooperation, we will decide the one person that is going to get that book. So very exciting stuff. So if you like the stuff we're talking about today, you are going to love that prize. So get entering that competition.
It's a very good book.
Okay. Have you specified the book?
I have, yes.
Okay. Should we keep it a mystery?
Yes.
We'll keep it a mystery. A spooky mystery.
Spooky horror mystery.
Oh no, Scoop! Oh no, it was Old Man Jeebus. Pull his mask
you can't
off.
see what I'm doing. I'm trying to pull his mask off, but you can't see that because it's ridiculous.
Because deep down, underneath all that, I'm just some horrible monster freak. Underneath all this human kind of flesh and stuff underneath.
Beard, you're a lot of beard.
Pure evil. There's a lot of beard. Yeah,
a lot of beard.
My friend complimented me on my beard.
It's a very good beard.
It's the winter months. It's getting a bit chilly.
I'm jealous because it'll take me at least 75 years.
You are a prepubescent child, so it's fine.
I feel like, Thanks. I don't come here to be insulted.
I know. I'm sorry. My guest. So let's get started. So let's talk about horror comics in general. So they have a long back. Before we even get to Tomb of Dracula, because we are going to talk about Tomb of Dracula and the rest of the Marvel stuff, we need to go back to the very, very beginning, just to put it all in context. So take it away, Dan.
Horror comics have been around for a very long time. They were around with superhero, the pulp stories. Mm-hmm. They were published in the UK as well. You had the Penny Dreadfuls. Mm-hmm. So horror has always been in kind of like the comic book medium, should we say.
I mean, even Batman stories were quite horrific,
quite
early
dark.
On. Yeah.
So we had companies in the 40s really take this horror and look at what they could do with it. And they did some horrific stories, which are absolutely fantastic. So you had like 5 or 6 publishers who decided they were going to really, really push horror. Mm-hmm. And they you had the Pristine books that kind of did reprints of the classic Dracula, the Bram Stoker's, and the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So you had what's called the Pristine books, which were like graphic novels. So they weren't like comics. They were pages and pages of story, then illustrations, then a couple of pages and then illustrations. But then you had companies that went all out with headless people and zombies and werewolves and body parts and
sounds good.
Sounds amazing.
I'm sold.
Yeah. So you had one particular one that did a book called my mind goes blank. EC
Comics.
Yeah.
So they were known for doing Tales from the Crypt. That's the most famous one.
Yeah.
Vault of Horror.
They did lots of different types of things. But you also had DC and Marvel, which also did horror books. They did lots of very good, and it made Timely before it became Marvel.
It was it Timely, Atlas, and then Marvel?
Yeah. They did lots of horror books. They did more horror books than they did horror and Western books than they did superhero books. They had like Captain America in horror books. And even after when they became Marvel, you had werewolves and vampires and things fighting the Nazis. Yeah. So it's got a long history of kind of horror in mainstream comics. But unfortunately, this is America. And They thought it was very bad, and it was changing the youth. It was messing with them. It was turning them into delinquents.
And what kind of era was this? What time was
this? Is probably, I think, the 40s, probably 50s.
Late 40s, early 50s,
yeah.
So actually, it's kind of the rise of the teenager, isn't it? Because
you had music.
Prior to the war, the child labour laws, you would become a teenager and you go straight into work.
Yes.
So in the 50s, we got a kind of new wave of youth, and teenagers, when they've got nothing to do, they're going to act out. And that's where you get your Jimmy Deans and all that sort of stuff. And
so
I was a teenage werewolf.
It was the era of kind of rebel.
Yeah.
People rebelling against things. And comics, a bit like music and other things, were front and centre. Comics were making our youth into bastards.
Yeah.
Terrible people who were going to go and
like they blame movies
these days. Yeah.
Not unlike maybe the Joker movie that's just come out, or any violent video games. Apparently they're opening video game addiction places now. That's a new program that they're set up on the NHS, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. So
bless them.
Yes, but in my opinion, I think if you want to do some horrible thing, no matter what you're influenced by, you're going to do that horrible thing. Yeah. You got a screw loose, you're going to do it.
So pre kind of 1950s, there were around about 25 to 30 publishers which were just publishing horror books, and this became a bit of a problem throughout America. There was lots of kind of movements. They tried self-regulating themselves by having a kind of thing they could sign up to.
Yeah,
didn't work. People didn't sign up to it. So unfortunately, they took it to Senate. So there was a big trial in Senate, and a nice man whose name is
Frederick Wortham.
There he is, nice man,
the writer of Seduction of the Innocent.
Yes, Seduction of the Innocent. He basically put together.
Sounds like a modern day porno.
Oh yeah. Now you look. He put together basically a couple of days worth and a big portfolio of how comics were making the youth homosexual, murderers.
So he stated that the horror comics and the crime comics and the noir comics were promoting violence, promoting aggression, promoting and some of the superhero ones also got linked into that. So Batman and Robin were, because two grown men can't live together without being homosexual. And, back in that day, homosexuality was a bad thing, was a very bad thing. So then they had to change. They had to give Batwoman and Batgirl a role in the books. Wonder Woman was condoned for the amount of cleavage and skin on show.
The famous bondage cover.
The bondage,
because she had a lasso, so she was tying people up.
That was her weakness as well for a long time. That was her weakness.
Yeah, so the bondage thing was a big issue.
A big bugaboo.
The main thing he was getting at was the horror books.
Yeah.
The use of gore, the use of violence. Yeah. And he put together a 12-page portfolio of stories and certain things that are definitely going to change our children. Yeah. And one of them was a baseball game where the baseball players basically cut a guy's head off and held it up and say, hey, do this.
Home run.
Yeah, there was a few other little ones. And EC Comics were the only people that actually attended the Senates.
Right.
And kind of defended himself and said, it's not on, the books are what they are, similar to what you just said. People are going to go out and do things. They're going to do it regardless. Yeah. But unfortunately, the publishers crapped themselves and went, right, what we're going to do? We need to do something. And they brought in the Comic Code, which is based on a magazine code that was around at the time, which is self-regulating. They all had to sign up to it. They didn't have to, but basically it was done by advertising. The advertising they sold to make the comics and make them cheaper and to pay people's wages, there would only certain companies would sign up to them if they had this code. So overnight, they went from 20 odd publishers to 2 or 3. And the 2 or 3 then went from comics to magazines because it was only regulated against magazines.
Okay.
So EC Comics tried to do science fiction. Didn't work.
No.
They tried to get rid of the gore, but people look at that EC Comics as the pinnacle of horror comics. So it didn't work. Marvel, DC went and did more science fiction stories. So the Tales of Suspense, which was a horror book, and the House of Mysteries, that was a horror book, they then turned to science fiction books. So you had John Jones,
Martian Manhunt,
stuff like that. So they went to more science fiction stuff, which was completely allowed.
Yeah,
you could do that. And the only one that really came out of it were kind of Dell and I can't remember the other company's name, but they did what was classed as wholesome comics. They had fluffy animals.
Okay, right.
And one of them happened to be owned by Disney.
Oh, okay.
So they still took the vampires and werewolves, but turned them into fluffy animals. So the fluffy animal comics were read during the day, and then boys would sneak off and get a horror comic, and in his words, would then go masturbate over the horror comics.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
They interviewed... That's a bit of a jump.
Yeah, they interviewed lots of... They say interviewed. I think coerced, shall we say.
Yeah.
Lots of teenage boys.
Yeah.
And basically what came out of it was that the Disney books and the nice wholesome books, they read in front of the family, and then they would go and touch themselves. Because
it was like a dirty little secret.
Yeah,
it was something they felt they should. I mean, as a child, I was privy to some comics I probably shouldn't have been reading at 7, 6, 7. Or I read Frank Miller's Daredevil, Man Without Fear, which has a lot of stuff in it I probably shouldn't have read.
But did it ever make you want to touch yourself?
No, it didn't.
See, that's the leap for me.
Yeah,
because it went from being about delinquents causing violence. Yeah. There's a long video. A black and white video.
But it's also like horror movies. Like it's that thing you shouldn't have access to. It's like a taboo thing.
Yeah.
But it's not like a perverted thing. There's nothing perverted about it. No. It's just having access to something. It's like, you get a cigarette when you're 10 or something. Yeah. It's like, this is naughty. And like we were saying, it's a bit rebellious. It's a little bit rebellious.
Well, they showed like a movie reel in the hearings, and it basically showed this boy sat down with his friends having a big laugh and reading these. And then he shows him pick up like a horror comic, and he starts reading it, and his mood changes, and he walks away from his friends, and he picks a brick up, and then he walks back over to his friends, and it cuts.
Right.
And so the horror comic
has made him
pick that brick up and then go and whatever he did with it. Oh, he might have. Put it down and got another one and build a wall.
Yeah.
We don't know what he did with that brick.
He could have masturbated with that brick.
Yeah,
Who knows?
Done,
he's got holes in that brick.
He may want to be a bricker. Maybe try. Let's make a den.
He wanted to get laid.
Well, hey. So the code all came out of this. Yeah. So the wholesome comics didn't need to have the code. They didn't last very long anyway. Yeah. So DC, Marvel, which were the big ones at the time, all signed up to it. EC sign up to
it. So it was basically censoring, wasn't it? It's like the BBFC or
was like the BBFC. It was self-regulating.
Yeah.
So there was the government didn't check the books.
No.
Their own companies, all the companies would come in and check what was coming out. But there were a long list of things that weren't allowed to use in them.
Yeah.
Now we could do an entire podcast just on the list. But some of the things that were in there, you couldn't use vampires. Couldn't use the word vampire. Couldn't use werewolf. Couldn't use undead. Couldn't use zombie. Couldn't use the word crime. Couldn't use the word blood. Blood couldn't be read. So if there's any blood at all, couldn't be read. Couldn't show limbs or anything coming off.
Yeah.
Couldn't use the word sodomy. Now, I get that.
Yeah.
Why would you have to put that in anyway? Sexual innuendos.
Yeah.
Weren't allowed.
In your endo.
Yes, but they would still use them, the famous Strenko cover. Story with
Nick Fury. Nick Fury's kissing, I think it's the Countess, she's called, Valletta or Valentina D'Allegra, maybe. I can't remember the name, it's quite a complicated name.
It sounds a good name.
Yeah, it's a big long name. But he's kissing her, they're being romantic, they're in a bedroom, and before you know it, they lie down on the bed, and then gun goes into a holster.
Yes.
Which suggests some things.
That he likes to put his gun in his holster before he gets naked.
Safety first.
I would think so.
Safe sex.
Let's hope he had his doesn't have it cocked.
Carrying on.
It was going to be silly. So they all signed up to this code. They all signed up, and straight away, horror comics disappeared. They were, for a long time, there were no horror comics out. It was purely sci-fi.
Yeah.
So you look at Batman comics around the time, Batman went to the moon, and he was fighting giant insects and this and the other. There wasn't the crime element anymore.
No.
And as for like EC Comics, the only really one that lasted was Mad.
Yeah.
And that was because it was just a magazine. They tried doing other formats, they tried to do other things, and it just didn't work because people wanted the normal books.
Going back to Frederick Wertham, I know that some of his quote-unquote research was falsified.
Yes.
Much like Joseph McCarthy, obviously it was part of that whole communist, these artists might be part of a communist agenda to ruin America, to bring down the wholesome ideal of America, and it's all falsified and, like you said, coerced, tortured. You know, it happened, and all these good kind of well-meaning artists. I mean, EC Comics went out of business.
Yes,
it died.
Yeah.
And however, there's a lot of love for that material and those stories. Tales of the Crypt, the movie, is based on several of those stories. Vault of Horror, the movie. I think this was by Amicus. I think Amicus did it.
Yeah, Amicus.
They're big on horror anthology anyway. So they're perfect. Creepshow is probably the best example of those stories kind of redone. One of my favourite horror movies anyway. But it's a huge influential. It's influenced filmmakers like Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, all those kind of things. We can't just kind of pass over that, and we can't forget that. And that kind of leads us into this kind of era that we're talking about. It's where things start to, you know, during the 60s, obviously the height of Marvel was superheroes. That became, it was
And the science fiction.
It was monsters.
Yeah.
It was the monsters and aliens, mostly
everything
Marvel.
was atomic. It was the atomic age.
The atomic age.
The atomic age. So everything was atomic. Everything was being made by radioactive spiders.
That's right.
Going to space being by radioactive.
I mean, the Hulk is Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, very much so.
You know, in the atomic age, Jekyll and Hyde with a bit of Frankenstein thrown in there as well. But and even Fantastic Four is a monster comic. It is effective,
you know.
Exactly. And all these people get transformed into these hideous, freakish people, and they just happen to use it in a superheroic manner. And this was and that was in response to the Justice League becoming popular. And you know, and then we carried on kind of throughout the 60s. More superheroes get more and more popular, but then it was kind of dying off again.
Yes.
We started to see people not using the comics code. So, for example, there's the famous Stan Lee Spider-Man issue where the US government asked Stan Lee to write a Spider-Man comic that had a negative view on and kind of explain the ideas of drug use and the dangers of drug use to the youth of America. Stan Lee was absolutely, I can do that. We can write a story that says that. Comics code go, absolutely not. You're not allowed to mention drugs or show the use of drugs. And they're like, no, it's negative. It's a negative view of drugs. It's not going, drugs are great, everyone. Drop some LSD. They don't specify what there's a kid on a roof, takes something, thinks he can fly, goes to jump off. Spider-Man swings in and saves him and like, yeah, don't do drugs, kid. You almost died. And then Harry Osborn has an overdose, and that leads to Norman Osborn remembering that he's the Green Goblin. And he comes back, and they ignored the code. Yeah, we're going to say, forget it, and we're going to print these books anyway. And they became one of the biggest selling comic books of that period, of the 70s.
Well, you had like the DC stuff with the Speedy shooting up in the front cover, which was printed without the code on it.
Yeah.
And there were still books printed without the code, but there were no horror.
No, that's true.
So during like I think around about 71, the code relaxed slightly. So even the code was still around up until 2002. Marvel was the first one to drop it. And then I think Image dropped it, and then DC. And
then they brought in their own kind of rating systems.
And then they did it themselves. They kind of relaxed it slightly. When I say slightly, they said, well, because all these horror characters now are out of print and they're in the public domain, you can use them.
Yeah.
So you were allowed to use vampires. You were allowed to use werewolf. You were allowed to use stuff in the net as I think I was stated as classic.
Yeah.
So Hunchback, Mummy, things like that.
So like the universal horror characters.
Yeah.
Most
so
of those kind
you could still use them. And it was like literally overnight, both DC and Marvel started putting out horror books.
Yeah.
Very different. Well, Marvel went for the classic horror. DC went for more kind of psychological horror, kind of more ghosts, more kind of supernatural.
Yeah.
As the horror
like
movies.
House of Secrets, House of Mystery.
Yeah. So during like the 30s and 40s with Universal Monsters, you had Universal doing all the monster ones, and then MGM doing kind of the House of Wax and these sort of movies, kind of different types. So it was very much a kind of separation
Modern
between
horror,
the two.
at the time.
So they tested the water before this by doing similar type of books where people turned into things, but they weren't werewolves.
Right.
What were they?
Well, for example, we had the Man-Wolf, which was in Spider-Man, and he was John Jameson, the astronaut son of J. Jonah Jameson, who went to the moon. as you do. And he found a little kind of gleaming gem. And he was like, "Oh, that looks nice.
Shiny.
I'll have that. I'll have that. I'll have
Maybe
that."
should have been a magpie.
He could have been a magpie, transforms into a magpie. So he picks up the gem, goes home, and he's like, "You know what? Make this into a necklace. I'm going to wear a nice kind of almost medallion type thing." And then the full
It was the 70s.
Yeah, the full moon happens as his big open shirt, and he becomes a man wolf, not a werewolf.
No.
Man-wolf.
Yes.
And it's kind of he's white or silver kind of hair, and he wears a suit. He wears a kind of suit trying to block the lunar radiation,
Yes.
I believe.
Like a spacesuit.
Yeah, like it's kind of it's like a yellowy thing. And he became like a tryout character because again the code hadn't been relaxed just yet. Morbius, the living vampire.
Yeah, that's very important. Living, because they also did called a mummy book.
Is it Nikantu?
Yes, the living mummy. Because he still couldn't use undead. Undead was still zombies.
Yeah.
Ooh, can't
No,
can't use that.
Reanimated
flesh.
Ooh.
Can't do any of that.
I mean, Frankenstein is effective. I mean,
Yeah, but
he's either a robot or he's an undead or he's both.
The living Frankenstein. In fact, the book was called Monster, wasn't it?
Monster of Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
Them,
So again, they changed it slightly.
Yes.
The look of the characters, like a Werewolf by Night and Dracula, were kind of. They weren't always based on the Universal.
No.
Like the Dracula is based on Jack Palance.
Yes.
Which is like really, one of the poorest Dracula movies out there. But there we go.
I've seen it on Amazon Prime. I think
There's some psychedelic stuff in that, man. You should watch it. Just when he's doing his thing, he goes like all red and blue eyes.
It's like hypnotizing.
It's awesome.
I want to watch it because like you said, his look was based on Jack Palance, who hadn't played Dracula at that point, but 2 years later he did in that TV movie.
Yeah.
But I think I will watch it just because of the link to Tomb of Dracula.
You need to watch it. It's mad.
Also, just want to mention Morbius, living vampire.
Morbius, yeah.
The classic version of vampires is they bitten, die, and come back like 3 days later from the grave, risen from the dead, so to speak, and they are now a vampire. Morbius is a scientist with a rare blood disease, uses bat DNA and some other, pseudoscience. It goes wrong, and he becomes a living vampire, so he must feed. But he basically, for all intents and purposes, he is a vampire, has the same powers as
blood, does he?
Well, this is interesting because in the comic he did bite. He would bite and he would drain blood. In the Spider-Man animated series, there was I think it was John Semper who was running the show. The first series had so much censorship that he got so mad with it. So the second series is like, we're going horror. He transformed Spider-Man to a six-armed monster, blades in it, Morbius, lots of other kind of weird and wacky creatures. And in that, Morbius, in the comics, he's actually Greek.
Yes.
He's a Greek character. But in this, he's kind of Transylvanian. He has
do the rest of the podcast in that voice. That's really good.
Michael Morbius, like that. And he has these kind of suckers, almost like leeches or something on his hand. And he's like, and again, he can't say blood.
Yeah, it's plasma.
So it's quite. It has a lot of links to actually the comic code in a way, because they couldn't mention that. They couldn't mention anybody anybody that died went to another dimension. There's a really great line me and my friend really enjoy from the Green Goblin in one of the shows. And he's like, and Spider-Man goes, "The Green Goblin? I thought you were..." "No, but you'll soon be." It's like they completely just... It's so quite clever writing.
Can't use those words.
No, can't say dead or anything. So yeah, he had these suckers. But however, like including a blade and stuff, that's still a really good show.
Yeah.
Even though they had such stringent... There's a lot of horror elements in that second season. Punisher's in it as well.
Yeah.
And I grew up on it, so I love that stuff. It's like crack cocaine to me, that stuff. I love that. But yeah, and there's also Sauron, who was named after the Dark Lord from Lord of the Rings. His real name's Karl Lykos, which was like a little link to lycanthropy, which is the werewolfism. And he got bitten by a pterodactyl and transformed into a pterodactyl man. So
Every home should have one.
yeah, I mean, I'd love to be a pterodactyl man. It actually has hypnotic powers as well, much like Dracula. So there you go.
It is, isn't it? It is
There
what
you
it
go.
is.
It's quite hot. But I quite like that they went so inventive and so different.
Yeah.
Because it created some really original comic book characters. That, again,
It was needed very much at the time.
yeah,
as well.
exactly. And that was a Neil Adams creation as well. Yeah. So
I love Neil.
yeah, he's a good
off
one.
his head.
He's a good one. He's a good one. He's a madden. He's a madden.
Completely off his head, but I like him.
Anyway, so let's get full on into that
So,
70s horror. What happened?
The biggest title out of the 70s horror boom was Tomb of Dracula.
Tomb of Dracula.
Tomb of Dracula was the biggie. Like you had Werewolf by Night, which was and did a few testing type things.
Yeah.
And you also have Ghost Rider and stuff that came out. As
Man Thing as well.
Man Thing.
Yeah.
But Tomb of Dracula is one of those that I'd love a lot. I'm spending lots of money collecting them all again now. So, but that was the book that came out with Tomb of Dracula.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said before, Marvel did go after the classics. So there was a Frankenstein book, there was a Mummy book, there was a Werewolf book, and pretty much all of them look similar to the Universal monsters.
Yeah.
Dracula, not so much. More classic Jack Palance stuff. He's more, big cape.
He's got a nice wispy mustache that
Yes.
I don't think any Draculas had had at that
No, but
point.
in the book Dracula has a mustache.
He does, yeah. And hairy palms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Show me your palms. Hairs.
All over.
But that was the big book for me, what defined kind of like Marvel horror in that time. Was that the covers are amazing.
It was the best-selling horror comic at that time, which is for a Marvel book as well. Like considering there was books a lot more hardcore, like eerie and creepy, with kind of more magazines and had a lot less rules. They didn't have a comics code to run by. They still had illustrations and stuff. So that's quite an accomplishment.
And he was that popular. He popped up in Spider-Man. He popped up in the Hulk. He popped up in the X-Men.
Yeah.
He popped up in the Frankenstein book. He popped up in anywhere they could put him.
They shoved Dracula in.
Yeah, put Dracula in. And he's very the lore of him in the books is very similar to kind of they haven't really messed with him that much.
No.
No.
No, I think you're right.
I'm a scholar and I'm just
No, I don't think so.
No. So they didn't mess with him that much. And the other characters are basically descendants of the original kind of
so
Bram
the
Stoker
characters
stuff.
from the Bram Stoker. So you've got Jonathan Harker was the original, and there's Quincy Harker. You've got Abraham Van Helsing. You've got Rachel Van Helsing, and you've even got a descendant of Dracula himself as the main character. He's called Frank Drake.
Yes.
So yeah, it's quite interesting to see, and obviously there's a lot of these are original characters, but they're based on the classic versions.
Yeah, and you had. Just standing up a moment because my bum's going numb.
Oh,
but it was good. It was a golden time for this sort of stuff. And what always drew me to them is the artwork. I'm brought up on Hammer, and Universal Monsters. That's my thing. And to look at these books, they could be Hammer.
Yeah, they could
be
easily,
kind of that.
Easily.
You know, you open the books and issue number 2, for instance, the cover. Dracula stood there, painted, lovely, beautiful painted cover. Yeah. Remember the artist in a minute? Stood there, lots of smoke, eerie stuff, cobbled streets. And it could be a cover for a Dracula movie. Yeah. And that's what he's doing.
All these covers are gorgeous. All the covers are gorgeous.
And plus I was young and I wanted horror.
Yeah.
In any shape or form I could get it. Give me horror.
Give me horror.
Give me horror. But I very much brought up on kind of Christopher Lee. And he does, as much as he's based, I think there's a bit of Christopher in there.
Oh, definitely.
He's very charming.
I think even that first cover, I think the very first issue, I know there's a little bit of that. And I know Gene Colan, who was the artist for the entire run.
Yeah, all 70 issues.
All 70 issues. He was inspired by a lot of Hammer horror films.
He loved,
and I'm to my shame, I've not seen that many Hammer horror films, I'll be honest, and I should see more.
What?
Yeah, I know. I saw The Devil Rides Out. That's a good one, but
what?
Yeah,
I'm a little bit appalled with you right now.
Doctor Terror is Amicus, isn't it? It's another Amicus.
Yeah. How can? Sorry, listeners. I'm about to beat him with a stick.
He's very disappointed in me now.
Not watched that. Okay.
Well, maybe that's our next. Maybe that's our next podcast.
We have to do a marathon of.
We'll just go through it.
I love them.
We'll do it. We'll do a big.
I spent my youth staying up.
I've got quite a few friends who like Lee and Cushing movies. Who've done Lee and Cushing podcasts, and I've seen Lee movies. I've seen Cushing movies as well. So maybe we'll have a big maybe we'll do a month. Maybe we'll do a specific Hammer month or something.
Because my youth was reading comics, staying up on a Sunday night,
Watching
Hammer. And then not getting up on Monday morning for school. That was basically my life.
Sounds
and then,
correct to me.
V started. Then it was like comics, horror, V.
Yes.
I've
never seen that either. Sorry, and that's not for Vendetta, is it? It's not that.
No.
one.
V for Victory.
Yeah. It's the alien thing, isn't it?
Yeah, which is now back on Sky or something.
Oh, is it?
Some Forces TV. I don't know.
Remade it.
Sorry,
They remake
No,
everything.
it's the show in the original.
Oh, the original one.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Back to the
Anyway,
comics though.
Hammer horror, very very big influence.
Yeah, and the interiors. You take Dracula and all the characters out of it. It's a Hammer set.
Yeah.
You know, the castle is a Hammer set. You look at the kind of streets these things are set in, and it's Hammer. Yeah. You know, lots of dry. You can imagine lots of dry ice and smoke.
I mean, Gene Colan's art style is very moody, very very kind of
wispy,
a lot of shadow, a lot of dark shadow, a lot of ink, a lot of black areas, and it's fascinating. I do have a kind of. Sometimes I really like his artwork, and other times I'm like, I don't think it fits. For Tomb of Dracula, he's perfect.
Yes,
This is his best book by far.
Yeah.
His stuff on Daredevil kind of works, but the problem with his stuff on Daredevil is that his work is very dark and moody, but the Stan Lee stories aren't that are quite kind of cheesy and stuff. Not in a bad way, but I don't think it kind of gels as well. Like this is just dark. The humour's dark, it's black, and is this the lead character is the villain.
He is the villain.
Yeah.
And he's not if people Dracula isn't
No, he's not a hero. This is the villain.
Yeah, he's the villain of the piece. Occasionally he would team up.
That's correct, yeah.
Just because it suited his gains.
He's an evil bastard as well. Like,
he manipulates people. We'll go into I think the makeup of the team and stuff. It is very much a team book.
Yeah.
But he would manipulate people. He does what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And he's evil. He's Dracula.
Yeah. And also, if you don't think he's evil enough, going out there sucking blood and killing people and making them slaves, he's also majorly racist in this. Like, he is super racist.
Yes.
Yeah, he is. He says things like, he says, he says things like Moor and Turk, and he called. I thought there was I read an issue today, and I thought he was talking to Blade, and I thought they misspelt Blade's name, but he says Black. He describes him as Black, but obviously in a very negative way, in a negative connotation, and he's evil as fuck. However, there are issues where you do sympathise for him as well.
Yeah, he's a man out of time. He's
exactly yes.
He's
back. He talks about he views humanity, and he talks about how there was much more honour in his day. The armies would fight face to face. There was bloodshed, and it was flesh against flesh.
You see the white of their eyes, and that.
Yeah, exactly. And he's honourable. There's a bit of honour to him, but he's still. And you do sympathise in some of the stories with his plight and stuff. Like he falls in love late in the book and has a child. I think it's Domini, I believe she's called. He gets involved with I think he pretends to be Satan with a satanic cult. The character called Anton Lupesky, and I think he must be based on Anton LaVey of the Satanic Bible. He falls in love with her, and they have a child, and Satan comes to kind of claim the child, I believe, and then the child turns into an angel and attacks Dracula himself. It gets pretty wacky towards the end.
Yeah.
But it's still good quality stuff.
Yeah, and even the black and white stories as well. There were the Dracula Live stuff, which was I think it was Warner, which is kind of like the kind of parent company of and there were lots of UK stuff, which were magazine size. So you've got Lilith in that first appearance of Lilith.
Is in the daughter of Dracula.
Yeah, which is in the oversized kind of, and the covers are just on their own. The pieces of art, each cover's painted. It's beautiful, and they really draw you in because they're very. The atmospheres on the cover.
It almost looks like a kind of stained glass.
Yeah, you can't see my hands, but I'm like,
he loves it so much, shaking with passion.
Yeah, and that's to me, comics are art.
Yeah,
and I struggle reading comics if the artwork's poor.
Yes,
I can get over poor writing.
Yeah,
but if the artwork's poor, I struggle. The good thing about Dracula, from about issue 4. I think Marv entered about issue 4.
I think it's issue 7, I believe. Is it? Yeah. I think it's when he commands all the children.
Yes. Yeah. The writing gets really good. Because the first couple of issues are very They don't know what to do with him.
They're fine. They're not bad, but they're not, because they're kind of not sure, like you said.
Yeah, and there's 2 or 3 writers writing it at the time. You had like Stan and going saying, I want Dracula. How do you want to use him? Just use him.
Just use Dracula.
Yeah.
I think the problem they might have had, because there wasn't many comics out there or stories out there where the villain was the protagonist, and that the main characters were technically the side characters in the whole thing. You know, the antagonists are the protagonists, and the protagonist is the antagonist. So maybe they struggled to write that with the stuff they'd been writing for so long, where it's all superhero based stuff, and maybe they were just trying to find their way.
Yeah, I think Roy Thomas kind of jump on and mess around with him a little bit, trying to get some cohesion to him.
Yeah.
So the first ones, the first couple of appearances and the first couple of stories, they're not really finding their feet. It's not really, it's not representative of the rest of the 70 issues.
Yeah, that's true.
For me anyway.
Yeah.
But I just love him because it's Dracula.
Yeah.
And he does kill people.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Like every issue, there's at least one scene where he goes out and has to suck blood.
Yes.
Basically, there's all that. There's the classic. He stalks up his prey, mesmerizes them, beats them, drinks their blood,
bats.
What have you. And that there's, that kind of that classic, and you kind of have to have that because that's what you kind of expect from Dracula.
And all the classic stuff are there. He turns into smoke. He turns into a bat. He looks into your eyes like I'm doing right you now. And,
whatever you want, Dan. Whatever you want.
Really?
I want to suck your dick.
Well, I've got lube.
Oh no! What was I thinking? Right.
I always bring it just in case. But no, and it is Dracula.
Yeah.
And I think I know we're gushing about it, but to kind of put it into context, Dracula in a comic had not been done properly.
Yeah.
You had these pristine books which were just reprinted the original story with bits taken out of it. Like the 3 banshees were taken out of it, killing the baby, the fresh was taken out of it. This was Dracula.
This is unadulterated.
Yeah.
This is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah. And they did follow like the Frankenstein book. The problem with Frankenstein, he's too sympathetic. He's basically, big monster walking around the place and, a bit hulkish and this and the other. Until Dracula dropped into the story and kills his lover. Yeah. Allegedly.
Okay.
Spoiler. And then, you've got Werewolf by Night, which is Jack Russell.
Yeah. That's
what a brilliant wicketkeeper he was for England. He's also a werewolf.
Well, I just think he... a character who turns into effectively a giant dog is called Jack Russell.
So call him Lassie. Oh no, there was that Lassie.
Lassie.
God.
I like Lassie.
Kez, Lassie.
I like Kez. Come here, Kez.
Kez.
Come here, Russell. Come here.
Come by.
Hey now.
So, but again, Werewolf by Night's it's good.
Yeah.
And it's famous for introducing lots of mainstream characters like Moon Knight.
Moon Knight, is a huge character.
But for me, it's only really good when Dracula's in it. when he just... And it did it with a case of, we've got a book we want to make really good. Let's drop Dracula in it.
Throw it.
And no matter where they put him, whatever he did, he was still this vampiric bastard.
And I think that just shows the strength of Dracula as a character in all of media in the book. How influential he's been. He appears in all sorts of media, comics, and all sorts. He's a strong character, and he's a strong villain, and he's a strong, antagonist. Obviously, in this. That's why I like this so much, is because it keeps what you want. It keeps the kind of purest elements of Dracula, but then it throws in all this other stuff.
Yes.
It's I know you say it's like a Hammer horror film. I know most of the Hammer horror films are set kind of in the past. They're set around the time.
Victorian England.
Yeah, Victorian era. But this is very much in the modern kind of 70s.
Yeah.
And the characters represent that, and they show that, and they have modern sensibilities. And the way that Dracula interacts with them is just like, this is I think you can see goes to a boxing fight, and he's like, they're wearing gloves. This is not battle. This is rubbish.
Well, it's the way they're saying, the way he talks.
Yeah.
As well. He's got this regalness about him.
Oh yeah, there's an eloquence as well.
He doesn't speak like I do,
Yeah.
Look at that. They've got boxing gloves on. They're Jesse's. But it's almost like, when they write Thor and they try, it's kind of
Shakespearean almost, yeah.
So when he's talking, you've got classic like New York kind of slang and
he's
stuff
a Kent.
in the books.
He's a Kent, isn't he?
And he's there like,
there is regal.
You people are beneath me. What, you're just food.
Yeah. Brilliant.
It is really cool.
Brilliant. I think he's really fun to read as well, because it's just like everything that comes out of his mouth is like almost just venom. Yeah. It's just like he hates people. He's like, you are worthless. You will die. All this.
And this is before we have anti-heroes.
Yeah.
This is before you actually cheered for the bad guy.
Yeah.
We had the big 90s where we had Punisher, we had Azrael, and we wanted, we're all miserable,
grim and gritty,
we're all pissed off with life, and we want the baddie to win.
Yeah.
This is before that. This is the time when big change in America. You've got NAM, you've got all this kind of stuff happening. Right. You've got big social unrest, and you're cheering for the baddie. You're cheering for the guy who is going to kill people, and that never happened before.
And I think you again, like we said, he is sympathetic. He has like a tragic backstory, like most of these characters do, and you kind of. Again, it's much like a Joker thing. You sympathise, but you don't condone.
No.
Which is I think is it's the morally grey thing. Like there's certain. I mean, in this book, they are the team. We'll talk about the team in a moment, I think, but the team is successful in their mission several times in this book.
Yes.
Which is very rare, and it's even rarer to have the protagonist is a villain, and then you've killed him. What? It's not Tomb of Dracula anymore. What is it? What is this book? And it still works. I mean, again, he doesn't stay dead for more than maybe a couple of issues at most. But, they're like, okay, what do I do now? Or like, where could this book go? Like you would think, it's just the end of the book now. But no, all this stuff happens. There's multiple villains turn up.
Yeah.
Like there's one of my favorites is Dr. Sun, who is a Chinese kind of super scientist who is no longer a person. He's just a brain in a jar, which has all that kind of classic 50s kind of film trope, like we saved Hitler's brain, that sort of stuff, or the brain that couldn't die, all that sort of stuff. And it's quite horrific, and it's nice that Dracula has an arch enemy as well, apart from the main team, the heroic team. He has this kind of weird kind of super, and again, that's not in the Bram Stoker. That's nowhere near.
Why, pray tell? Why do we not have a brain in a jar?
But it's very pulpy, and it's very fun, and it's very kitsch. It's very 70s as well. I think 70s for Marvel was probably one of the most creative
lots
periods.
Of drugs.
Yeah, lots of drugs. Lots of drugs. Just read any Steve Gerber stories. Read Defenders and read Man-Thing, because that is just acid comics for me. That's just and they're brilliant. They're good. It's not like, this is shit because someone was clearly on drugs. It's expanded their mind and expanded the comic book experience. But I think it's so I went and read back. I didn't read the whole run because I didn't have time, because that's a lot.
70 issues.
70 issues plus. There's mini-series, sequels, there's magazines, giant-size annuals, regular annuals, you name it. And then his multiple appearances in other superhero books. There's a lot to read. So I decided to read two main arcs, if you will, because a lot of I wanted to read the Satanist arc towards the end and up to the end of the book, but that's quite a long arc. I think that's about 24 issues. So I read the first 7 issues by Marv Wolfman, which I believe they call To Kill a Vampire. I think that's the name of the arc.
Yeah, well, I think they did that in the book, didn't they? To Kill a Vampire. They put that.
To Kill a Vampire. And it basically, it's 7 to 14, which includes the first appearance of Blade, and Blade killing Dracula while working with the main team. And the other story I read was called The Triumph of Dr. Sun. So I think that's issue 36 to 41 or 42. And that's basically Dracula coming over to the US. Because up until that point, it's all in England as well. Like for the majority, it's based in England. Blade is an English guy. He's an English character, which you might not know. Weird fact, but
with lovely hair.
Yeah, and in that first arc, they kill Dracula, introduce Blade, and they kill off one of the main character's daughters. Like he kills Quincy Harker, kills his daughter Edith, turns her into a vampire, and then Quincy has to stake his own daughter within that arc. And then obviously something happens, and then Dracula comes back I won't spoil it. And then in the triumph of Dr. Sun's draining his vampiric powers to take over all the armies of the Earth and control them. And also introduces a really nice character who's based on Marv Wolfman as well, which is Harold H. Harold, who's a kind of schlocky vampire writer. And he's just like this useless, kind of nebbish, kind of comic foil. And he wants to interview a vampire, and he finds Dracula, and he kind of helps him. And it's brilliant. It's so much fun, and it's nice to have that character inject a bit more humour into the books, because they have been, by that point, they are super serious.
Yeah, and like what you just said, then people die in it, people get staked in it.
Yeah, you don't know who's going to live or die.
Yeah, characters you don't know, all of a sudden they're dead.
Yeah.
In spectacular ways.
Oh yeah,
most
huge.
Of them. I can't remember what Blade looks like. When he first appeared,
in the comic
shirt, and he's got
a fairly big afro. Yeah. He's got green goggles.
The green goggles.
He's got green goggles. He's got kind of a big overcoat with he's got several, like in the movies he uses like silver stakes. Yeah. But in this he carves wooden knives, and he has
that show like crosses.
Yeah, I think he has some other stuff. But he basically looks a bit like Shaft. It looks like a bit like Shaft, but with goggles and stakes on.
Actually, I've completely forgot about the goggles.
Yeah. No, that's an important part of his kind of character. He wears shades or goggles. I mean, there's some times where he doesn't. In the early 90s, he doesn't. But that's I think that's a big kind of part of his iconography. But again, like Gene Colan was actually known for he created the Falcon.
Yes.
He created Blade. And he also created Brother Voodoo, who would later appear in Tomb of Dracula as well. And he was kind of dealing with all the kind of zombies and things like that. He later became Dr. Voodoo and the Sorcerer Supreme after Doctor Strange lost that title. So some great he's got a great eye for kind of diversity. And again, not drawn, as, years pass where black people would be drawn as stereotypes. And I think Gene Colan liked to do body diversity as well. Like there was a lot of, most comics were kind of just white, handsome, young people in good shape. But he would he'd try and do more grotesque stuff. Or there were larger people.
Chubby ladies in it as well.
Things like that. Yeah. And I think I really respect that about him, and adding it, and it adds another layer of realism to it. Obviously, you've got this big guy walking around in a giant cloak, and people are like, whoa, I love your outfit, dude, and things like that. And you're like, I don't know how much I believe that, but the rest of the world they create. What's really good about it as well, and I know you said that like Dracula guest stars in a lot of other books, but in Tomb of Dracula, the Marvel Universe is almost very much kept out of it for the most part. There's a couple of appearances by some other characters, but I think they fit within the terms of the book. So Doctor Strange turns up in a crossover because Gene Colan was also drawing Doctor Strange at the time. So they have a battle.
Big collar.
Yeah, huge collar. Massive, thick.
Big flip.
Yeah, big flippy bits.
Big collar.
You know what we're talking about. Just Google Gene Colan, Doctor Strange. You'll know the big collar.
He did like big collars and capes. Because Dracula's got quite a big...
Oh, he's got the big kind of like... It's almost like a kind of star or... big red star thing. But they have a battle, and Doctor Strange believes he's beaten Dracula, killed him. And he's like, right... Job done. Brilliant. Walks off. And then you go over to Tomb of Dracula, and it turns out that Dracula's actually hypnotised Doctor Strange into thinking he's killed him. So he kind of gets the last laugh. So,
how many people have done that to Doctor Strange?
Not many. Not many people can kind of... Because he's very powerful, Doctor Strange.
Yeah, so, Moonblink Doctor Strange.
Yeah, exactly. And also the Silver Surfer turns up.
Yeah.
And they use him in the best possible way. They use him... I mean, Silver Surfer has always been written as a kind of Jesus Christ figure, kind of, why is the world so violent? I just want to bring peace. And, why do they hate each other so much? He's the pacifist. He's that kind of character. And when he turns up, he's, Dracula is Satan. And it's that battle, and it's pure good versus pure evil. And it's a fantastic clash. And they both, I can't remember how it resolves, but they both kind of go their separate ways. But apart from that, and maybe Brother Voodoo and a couple of other maybe supernatural characters, nothing.
No. And they introduced lots of new characters, like Deacon Frost and stuff like that.
Yeah, Deacon Frost, who was obviously in the Blade film.
He's the main
antagonist for Blade. And Hannibal King as well, who is... the issue where he's introduced, I think, is an absolute classic.
Yes.
The twist comes at the end, but it's a proper old noir, gumshoe, hard-boiled detective story with a vampire kind of twist in it, and that issue alone is brilliant.
Over 70 issues, you can get 70 issues of most characters. and basically the genre will stay the same.
Yeah.
But with, like you're saying, you had noir stuff in there, you had horror stuff in there,
comedy,
bit of superhero stuff in there, you know, a bit of comedy in there. Through 70 issues.
Yeah.
You know, imagine if it went on to 170 issues. You know, there's so much could have been done with it.
Easily. But you know what I quite like? It gets an ending.
It does get an ending.
And that's not many comic books, not many arcs or runs or creative runs get to tell that ending. Sometimes it's cut short. Luckily, I think they were ahead of the game. They'd written 2 or 3 issues and drawn 2 or 3 issues prior to their cancellation. So I think the final issue is 3 issues, kind of bumped together, and they get to tell that ending. Yes, of course, Dracula comes back, he makes further appearances, and those characters come back. But if you wanted to end it there, done. You could just leave it.
Yeah,
and it's a great ending. It's a powerful ending. It's impactful.
Because most books when they're cancelled are just, oh, really?
Yeah, it's a cliffhanger, or it's kind of like, and it's like, and usually they have to resolve those plot threads or storylines in other books.
And it ends with, no, I'm joking.
With Dracula's tomb?
I think it ends with Dracula going to Florida and settling down with 50 million children.
That sounds about right.
Being able to go out in the sun and wears little shorts. And, you know, is that not right? Is that how it happens?
I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since I read the finale. So
it's been a while since I read it. I seem to read the first 10 over and over.
Yeah.
I seem to forget and then go back. Like I'm going through a bit of a Marvel
renaissance.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
You can see I was trying to say that. And I'm basically just spending money on old Marvel horror.
Because old Marvel is the best Marvel.
Yeah, very much so. And, you know, I went out and bought number 1 the other day, and I bought number 2, and I bought number 3. My wife doesn't know I bought number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
But, you know, she will too soon.
Yeah, I'm sure
I went out and bought Werewolf by Night. I bought the Living Mummy issues, which are in some...
is it supernatural thrillers?
Yeah,
Something
I think he runs for like 5 issues, and he comes back again and does another couple issues.
Yeah.
So I'm going through very much a horror... Marvel-y horror stage. And again, it's just the artwork kind of brought me back.
Yeah. It is good quality artwork.
And the fact that...
And it holds up till today.
And there's there's not really many horror books really out there anymore.
No. I mean, there are horror comics out there, but they're not making the kind of impact that Tomb of Dracula did.
Yeah. And it's... A lot of the best horror stuff is small press.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's easy. You can get...
Yeah.
You can shock people more.
And you can get people interested quick.
Yeah.
You know. Why do you think they make so many of the horror films? Because they're cheap, easy.
Exactly.
And they're easy to promote as well.
Yeah.
So that's the same for comics.
So, Tomb of Dracula.
Yes.
Team.
The team.
It's like I'm leading it. So, Dan.
Yes.
Discuss the team.
The team. So let's start off with Frank Drake. In Blade Trinity, Dracula turns up as well, and he wants to be known as Drake. So Frank Drake is a descendant of Dracula, and he doesn't really believe in the kind of, you know, the vampirism. He inherits the castle and what have you, and him and his friend go down. He's taking his fiancée, and they're kind of just poking about, and they discover the tomb of Dracula. And I think it's called Graves. I believe the friend's called Graves.
Yeah.
And he discovers the tomb, and he's like, "What the hell is this?" Pulls out the stake, and Dracula is reborn.
Bibbidi bobbidi boop.
Bibbidi bobbidi boop. Bite. He's now Dracula's slave, or he hypnotizes him, what have you. And Frank Drake's fiancée is killed, drained of blood, died, and it's all Dracula's fault. And he's a bit cowardly at the beginning. He kind of doesn't really, you know, he's not into this vampire killing. He's kind of just like, I think he's gambled his fortune away. And I think the last thing he has is this Transylvanian castle, and he wants to turn it into like a theme park, I believe, which happened in real life as well, actually.
Yes,
and then the Romanian people were like, no, don't do this, please. So Dracula comes back. This was not a good idea. Dracula land, welcome.
It could work.
I bid you welcome.
I would probably go for free.
Yeah, sure, I'd go for that. So he meets Rachel Van Helsing, who is a descendant, like we said, of Abraham Van Helsing, the famous vampire hunter from the Bram Stoker books. Dracula came to her house on her 16th birthday and tried to drain her blood and mesmerised her into falling in love with him. And, you know, he scarred her, killed her parents in front of her as well. She's got this kind of scar, which is quite interesting as well, to have such a beautiful character, which is a good thing that Gene Colan did as well, was had a beautiful character but with a scar. You know, that's very rare to see. And she's pretty cool with a crossbow. She's pretty good with a crossbow.
You see a lot with a crossbow.
Yeah, she loves that crossbow.
Yeah.
I actually think Tomb of Dracula has to have been an inspiration for Buffy.
Yes.
There's no way. Joss Whedon is a comic book fan, guru, writes comic books. He knows of Tomb of Dracula. There's no way in my mind he never read Tomb of Dracula. And it's all about a modern day team with varying ages, varying ethnicities, varying skill sets and skill levels. You know, some of them are even monsters themselves, much like Blade or, Seth Green's character. I can't remember his name currently. Spike or Angel, those kind of
Giles
things.
character kind of...
Yeah, it's Quincy Harker type.
Which I told you, in fact, Quincy Harker was the BBC dramatization.
Yes, you were saying, yeah. Yeah, you were just saying.
The character was called Quincy Harker.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
You can have that on me.
Exactly. And so he meets Rachel, and then through her, they kind of fall in love and have a bit of a romantic thing going on. They meet Quincy Harker, who has a high-tech wheelchair, and again, related to the Harkers from the Bram Stoker novel, and he can shoot various things out of his high-tech wheelchair. This is before Xavier had his high-tech wheelchair. Yeah. Xavier, for how many years, just had a regular wheelchair. Wasn't floating about, didn't have any weapons in it or anything. It was just a wheelchair he was in. It didn't even have the X's on the wheels.
Just wheels.
It was just a wheelchair. So Harker kind of, influenced that. Would shoot poison or explosive darts from it. And Dracula caused him to be in the wheelchair, killed his wife, kills his daughter, and he's kind of this aged man. And there's a bit where in the Triumph of Dr. Sun they have to resurrect Dracula, and he's against the whole thing, but he's like, this is our only chance to beat Dr. Sun. We have to raise him. But he's the only one who's even a match for Dr. Sun. Yeah. And then he's like, we have to do it. And then the second Dracula, he's such a bastard, Dracula. He's such a fucking bastard. They raise him from the bed, and he's like, oh, thank you for raising me from the dead. Now, just so you know, they're like, oh, we've got some blood sacks for you, bags of blood for you. And he's like, no, Dracula must feed. Dracula must kill tonight. Another innocent life. And this is your fault.
Yes.
You brought me back, and I will help you, but another innocent life is a cost because of this. Your actions have cost this. And I'll live with it because I'm Dracula. Yeah. I'm a complete bastard.
I don't give a shit.
And I have to do this to live. But it'll be on your soul forever. Yeah. I'm like, you fucking bastard. They always feel bad about it and they don't agree to it. Like, not all of them agree to it, but they do it anyway. He's such a bastard. But I love him as well. He's great.
It's great. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That sums
up Dracula. And again, they do work together and they do kind of work out things, but they do battle a lot as well. And it's such a fascinating book, and it's a fascinating character. And to see this team kind of work together. You've also got Taj. I think it's Taj Nittal.
Yeah.
Is he? I think he's Indian. Is he Indian?
I think he's Indian.
Sikh?
Yeah.
I think
he's Sikh.
He's a Sikh. Yeah, he's a Sikh. Wherever he's from, he's a really interesting character, and he's got an interesting backstory as well. He's mute, but then we find out he's not mute, I believe, and that he's
Psych!
but he's this kind of big, strong man, and he's always, he's very willing to kind of battle Dracula and doesn't say a word and just throws himself for all of his friends, because there's this real strong bond between all these characters. That is really palpable in the books, and they argue, and they've got very different, like Frank's like this, belligerent American, Rachel's this kind of, strong and silent female character. Quincy's intelligent but haunted and broken man. Yeah. They're all great. Hannibal King comes in later as well, and he's fascinating on his own. Blade as well, has gone on and they do use a lot of the character. Hannibal King is also in Blade Trinity as well. Not the best Blade film, but interestingly enough. Blade 2, in fact, was supposed to have Morbius in it, but they didn't have the rights for Morbius, so they created Nomak, who's a genetically created vampire. So that's a nice, interesting fact. The Morbius movie's still coming out, though, so I'm going to see that eventually. Whatever.
I rolled my eyes there.
Whatever the result. And I think that is one of the strengths of the book, is the supporting cast. As good as Dracula is.
No, definitely.
As good as Dracula is, if you didn't have that supporting cast and that diverse set of characters, interesting, fascinating characters on their own altogether, they're really quite interesting. And again, it's that mission. It's a simple mission, is we need to kill Dracula.
Yeah,
and that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know about the story, really. But it's really strong writing, and I know Marv Wolfman never wanted to write team books, hated writing team books. But those are his best
He's
books.
very good at
Yeah, I know.
Titans,
Teen Titans, he's a masterclass at these team books.
While like Tomb of Dracula's out, all these other publishers are also launching their own books.
Yes.
So EC have come back. These are the ones who are doing these books. And Dracula's outselling all of them. Yeah. He's outselling Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
He's outselling these massive books, which have been around for decades.
I mean, even the X-Men isn't around at this point.
Yeah. He's outselling all these books. Dracula, for God's sake,
Dracula is the most popular comic book hero.
And they do, and these, later on in the books, I think from about 40 onwards, they stick this massive sticker on the front of the book saying #1. First off, he said #1 comic, then went to #1 horror comic.
Yeah.
And you think about, this is Dracula, this is 70s, we've not had a book like this for outselling characters who've been around, well-established kind of superhero types. I think it's a lot of the time. I think there was you've got all this kind of unrest in America, you've got the social movement, you've got, and it's very much in the book, like you were saying, you've got lots of different ethnicities, you've got females, different sizes, you've got these other characters from all around the world. So it's very much, if you look at the social movement in America, it kind of mirrors itself in the comics as well.
Yeah, definitely.
The main character, one of the main characters is Blade. Yeah. You've got all these other stuff going on with it, which I think, I say it's very telling of the time. It's brave as well for the people to do, sticking someone like Blade in the book.
It's very mature storytelling as well. Like, it's really, it is a serialized drama. Yes. It really is. And you don't often get that with a lot of comic. Back then, it was usually like 2 issues and done, for the most part. And there are arcs in it, definitely, but it is very much an ongoing.
And when Tomb of Dracula finished, that was pretty much the end of Marvel horror, really. Yeah. In that kind of guise. Yeah. Like, obviously, we've still got Ghost Rider, we've still got Blade knocking around, and Dracula, Tomb of Dracula has popped up.
Here and there. But not like, if we think about it now, back in the day, that's not a very long run. No. Nowadays, that would be a massive run. For a small creative 2-guy creative team. Yeah. That would be a massive run. But I think that's very telling. Like, we see that as a success story, but back then it might not have been necessarily that much.
World by Night was like 48 issues or something like that,
and again, that's great as well.
Yeah, the other ones kind of ran for like 10. I think
10 to 15. I think
Frankenstein was. I think it's 19, 20 issues.
Yeah, I think so, something like that. Yeah.
So, but then you've got the 70 issues. Yeah. Flying
even like Man-Thing, if you include like Inventor into Fear and the Man-Thing title and the giant sizes, they were very into the giant sizes around this time as well.
They did like the giant sizes.
So giant size Man-Thing. Yeah, you can make all the jokes you want.
Say it again.
Giant size Man-Thing.
Amaze balls.
That's one of the best comic book titles of all time. But that was at least 30 plus issues, almost 40 issues, and again, quite successful. Now we look at that and say, oh, that ran for quite. We can barely get 5-7 issues out of a comic before it gets cancelled.
And they've been out. They're reprinting. Like at the moment, they've got the Warner kind of magazines reprinted.
Yes,
all in black and white as well. Because I hate it when they colour them in.
Yeah,
keep them black and white. Yeah. Dracula has been split into 3 volumes now. First volume's really hard to get hold of. 1 and 2, dead easy. Yeah. I happen to have them in my store.
That's Tomb of Dracula, the complete collection?
The complete collection,
Volume 1, 2, and 3, I think,
yes,
at the moment.
Number 1 is very expensive. Number 2 and 3.
Because people want the first one, don't they?
And I think I pretty much read 1 to 10 more than any. Yeah. Because I forget and I have to go back and read it because I'm getting old. Go and get it. And get it I hate digital comics. Get it digitally. It's the only way you can get it is to get it digitally. Get it digitally, just so you can read the first 10 issues.
And again, I mean, you can sign up to, like I do, I sign up to Marvel Unlimited, so it's accessible there, the whole thing, for the most part. But it's really nice to hear you, because you're much more of a kind of a DC guy, so it's really nice to hear you like praise some kind of Marvel stuff. And I mean, I'm more of a Marvel guy, and you're more of a DC guy, but I love DC as well, and you like Marvel. But it's nice to hear you talk about a title that you really like. I don't think
DC nailed horror at all. No, they had some good. The House of whatever it's called.
I think DC have got. I think DC have probably got a better pantheon of horror or mystical characters.
Yeah, but around this time, the books I do it. I almost bought a book of the weekend. I can't remember what it's called, but it was. The only reason I bought it is because when I've got a book about horror books and stuff, and it's a picture of. It was saying this is like the first book after the Cold. Came out, so I wanted to get it and read it, but I ended up buying World by Night #1 instead.
Nice.
I don't think they nailed it. No. I think having characters that people knew was a good thing. Having characters you didn't have to pay for. Yeah. And having them styled in a certain way that even if you walk down the street, you're telling me no matter whether you're 5 to 55 to 500,
you know the Wolfman, you know Dracula,
Wolfman, you know Frankenstein, you know Dracula.
Even the name, you might. Some kids can't read, but they know Frankenstein. They know Dracula. They know
DC's
what they do.
I Vampire.
Yes,
was appalling compared to this. All the lore around it, they changed a bit about how vampires were and stuff.
Yeah.
When they redid it for the New 52, it was a little bit better, a bit manga-ish and a bit kind of...
young adult sort of thing,
But nothing ever came close. And for me, as a big DC fan, saying they didn't really nail horror. Like, if you think about it, all the kind of reprint stuff are like Marvel horror. All they really got is kind of Swamp Thing. Yeah,
I think that's the main kind of... Obviously, you had the Len Wein run, and then you also had the Alan Moore run, and they're both very good runs, very different.
Yeah,
I'd say Alan Moore takes a lot from Steve Gerber's Man Thing, the kind of trippy kind of.
He's more of a hero stuff. He's sympathetic. I think.
I think Man Thing is it's depending on the story and the characters he has, because he doesn't have a mind. He only responds to emotional stimuli. So if it's negative emotion,
sounds like some of the people I know.
So he responds to, if someone's, happy and is not afraid of him, he's genuinely okay with them. He's just a shambling moss man, a man muck, if you will. But Swamp Thing has a mind. He has intentions and dreams and aspirations. But Man Thing is very much a cipher. So again, you support him with a really good supporting cast, or a Spider-Man, or a Thing or something like that. Iron Man, put a good cast together. He's a really interesting character and can affect the story in so many different ways. I really do think he's one of the most underrated and unappreciated Marvel comic book characters there are. Yeah. And especially those, I don't read anything else that Man Thing that's not by Steve Gerber. If it's by Steve Gerber, read it. Everything else, bit rubbish. Or some of the guest appearances are okay, here and there, because I just like seeing Man Thing, so put him in a guest spot. But he's probably my favourite, apart from Tomb of Dracula. I've not really read much Werewolf by Night, but I will. I think he needs more kind of spotlight. He had a bad film, so nobody wants to touch these characters after they have a bad film.
TV film,
sci-fi
produced TV movie.
Rubbish.
He had nice glowy eyes though.
I don't think the design was bad. I just think the film was
didn't really pull off the kind of touchy, mindy stuff.
Yeah, I think I think they just grounded it too much in reality. I think that was the main issue. But I have been watching the Swamp Thing and Amazon Prime show. So I'm enjoying that quite a lot, actually.
The practical effects on it.
Yeah, the practical effects are brilliant. I'm going to talk about, with our friend Michael Chandler, I'm going to talk about that quite soon.
Talking of mindless mind things.
Mindless man things.
Sorry. There we go.
We love you, Mike. We love you, really.
You can edit that out. It'll be fine.
I'm going to leave it in. I'll leave it in.
I've called him worse.
He can get over it. I wanted to kind of, I think, go read it. Go read Tomb of Dracula.
Yeah, go read it.
I've got a few recommendations for Dracula stories, in fact.
Oh.
And a few other kind of horror kind of reading recommendations. Before that, actually, I'd like to talk about some of the other characters we might not have mentioned. They've come out of this kind of era of Marvel, the kind of horror characters. So we spoke about Ghost Rider.
Yes. Was number 9 because Werewolf by Night was number 2.
Yes, so he was So it was a Marvel Spotlight, I believe.
Number 9, yeah.
So they did Marvel Spotlight. So they did Werewolf by Night, got a series. Ghost Rider.
Yeah, I preferred Ghost Rider's original design as well.
I read it with the kind of and they kind of brought that back for the Robbie Reyes version.
I quite like that.
That is cool. Selling his soul to Satan.
We've all been there.
Yeah, who hasn't done that? But obviously Ghost Rider and all those kind of characters and those related characters and there's been multiple Ghost Riders since as well, and multiple. Heavens on Fire has an army of Ghost Riders throughout history.
It's just silly.
It's crazy. Werewolf by Night we mentioned. Topaz, who's kind of his girlfriend, sorceress as well. She gets introduced in there. Tigra was known as was in a giant-sized Werewolf by Night, and she was known as the Werewoman.
Yes.
So it's kind of a new. That was kind of during the kind of feminist wave of characters that came through.
Frankenstein. Well, Werewoman. They're a woman.
Werewolf.
Well, there's a wolf.
So you also had we talked about Frankenstein's monster, Man Thing. Howard the Duck was also introduced.
Howard the Duck.
I mean, he's not really a horror character. But
I don't know. It's in the film. scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, it was quite bad.
Yeah.
Jennifer Kale is a sorceress in there as well. She and Satana, who's the sister of Son of Satan, Damon Hellstrom, or Hellstorm as he's also known.
Devil gets around, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's a randy bastard.
Well, Stanley's original idea for Son of Satan was, I want to do a comic about Satan. Satan's the hero. And they're like, pull it back a bit, Stan. Pull that back just a touch. Think about it. We've already got Dracula, fair enough. We made him slightly sympathetic, but it's hard to make Satan sympathetic.
Yes.
So maybe
the fallen angel.
Take that back a bit. Just like maybe give it a bit more of a human element. Son of Satan? Yeah, whatever. Just do it. And, Ghost Rider and all that. Very full. I mean, it was part of the Satanic Panic, I guess, and all those kind of during that era. So Lilith, we talked about, daughter of Dracula, she was in there. So Ulysses and Elsa Bloodstone, who are kind of immortal monster hunters.
Yes.
Both, I think they're both English as well, so which is nice. Elsa's kind of very much like in a Buffy vein, more of a modern character. Kind of late 2000s, I think, or early 2000s maybe. But she's come into her own recently. She's in the new Marvel video game.
Oh.
Who else? Brother Voodoo we talked about. Nikantu, the living mummy, as you mentioned. Living. It, the living Colossus.
Have you seen the cover to that?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of grabbing and breaking out of something, I think.
Yeah, it's good. I like the cover. It's very kind of reminds me of a B-movie-esque.
Yes, very much so. You've got another very similar character to him is the Golem, which is obviously based off Jewish folklore, kind of that legend. Yeah, exactly.
I know my shit.
You do. I know you do. I don't need to tell you anything. That's for everybody else. So the Devil Slayer, have you heard of that one? No. He's a bit spawnish. He fights demons and he can pull different weapons out of his cloak. And he can teleport and stuff. He's kind of in the Defenders a little bit and some other stuff. The Manphibian.
Never heard of it.
Manphibian I think it was on the first issue of like Legion of Monsters, when there was it was part of the magazine, black and white. But yeah, he's one of the lesser known of the monsters. Simon Garth, the Zombie, or Tales of the Zombie, I think the comic was called. Gabriel the Devil Hunter, who's kind of an exorcist. I think he was in those magazines as well, those magazines. And the Straw Man, who was also known as the Scarecrow.
That's in the omnibus, Marvel omnibus stuff. He's on the back cover.
Yeah, because he's basically kind of a demon that's in a painting.
Yeah.
And he's also a fear lord, as several characters kind of feed on fear, like Nightmare.
He looks like Scarecrow.
And Despair, yeah, he's an actual Scarecrow. But it's not. I think they changed his name not to confuse him with the other Marvel character, the Scarecrow, Ebenezer Lawton, or obviously Jonathan Crane from DC Comics. But yes, let's get on to the recommended reading. So you mentioned Tomb of Dracula Complete Collection.
Yes.
It's also been collected in a few smaller volumes, I believe.
Yeah, and all the giant size ones and all the offshoots have been put into a book as well.
Yeah, there you go. I've got the Essential Collection, which is black and white version. They're out of print, obviously, because they're a bit old. But they are still available and they're relatively cheap, depending on which one you're after. But I think number 1 would be quite expensive, volume 1. And if you don't mind reading kind of newspaper print and black and white, it's fine.
Well, that's right. The fact that they were cheap.
They were cheap. Exactly, they were cheap at the time. And that's why I was a bit like, I don't want to buy black and white for a while. And then I was like, you know what, forget it.
Colour me.
Exactly, just do that. So I'm going to recommend Doctor Strange versus Dracula, the Montesi Formula. So this Werewolf by Night introduced the idea of the Darkhold, which is this tome of evil and dark spells and created werewolves and vampires, and it's featured in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the Ghost Rider series when he's in it, so it's a big part of that. And Doctor Strange successfully destroys all vampires in the Marvel Universe, all of them.
It's a bit mean.
Yeah, well, they probably deserved it, didn't they? I think Hannibal King survived. I think he kind of let him off.
Do they deserve it? I don't know. Natural selection.
Who knows? But I mean, it's in that book, so somebody put it in there for a reason.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that was written by like the elder god. I think it's Chthon. Is it Chthon?
Okay.
Chthon, and he's like the god of evil.
Yes.
So but yeah, that's a really
He's
cool.
my favourite god, by the way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, surely. I also recommend Captain Britain and MI13 Vampire State. This has got all the British superheroes teaming up, and Dracula has a base on the moon, and he fires vampire suicide bombers at London from his moon base. It's genius. It is one of the best things.
I mean, it looks great. Doesn't
It is gorgeous. It's some really great art. It's written by Paul Cornell. I think it's Paul Cornell. Fantastic. The whole series is great. If you really want to get into Marvel, like British superheroes, it's amazing. Black Knight's in there. Spitfire. Blade turns up as well. Union Jack. Faiza Hussein, who becomes the wielder of the Excalibur sword. I think she calls herself Excalibur as well, maybe. I can't remember. I think she might kill Dracula with the sword, I believe. Spoilers. But it's
That would work, though, wouldn't it?
but there's a great bit where Doctor Doom meets up with Dracula, and Dracula goes to attack Doctor Doom, and he goes, "Actually, you can't attack me because I've got a piece of Jesus Christ's crucifix in my armor, so you can't touch me." And Dracula's like, "Oh no, you got me! Oh well, maybe next time." So he's just like, "Yep, can't do that." Dracula makes up quite a few appearances in the X-Men, trying to woo Storm into being like the Queen of the Vampires.
Who wouldn't?
And who wouldn't? She's Doctor
yeah.
Doom tries to woo her. It's a lot of people trying to woo Storm.
Yeah.
Beautiful, fantastic character. So I'm going to recommend X-Men Curse of the Mutants, which is more of a modern take. And his look is altered for that, and he's kind of got more of a Legacy of Kain look, if you're familiar with those video games. And there's a great bit where they have to resurrect Dracula, and Blade says, no, because you wouldn't resurrect Hitler to be, Osama bin Laden, would you, or Saddam Hussein? And I just love that bit. Some of the other comics that we talked about, so Werewolf by Night, complete collection, Man Thing, complete collection. I'm going to recommend a 90s comic that kind of brought back, I know, right? That brought back the kind of horror characters. So I'm going to recommend Spirits of Vengeance, Rise of the Midnight Suns. Yeah. So that kind of combines Morbius, Ghost Rider, and all these other kind of characters. A lot of the Tomb of Dracula characters come back as well. Blade and Frank Drake and Hannibal King. They're known as the Night Stalkers. I'm going to recommend as well my favourite version of Ghost Rider, which is the Danny Ketch version, which is the 90s version, which I'm partial to. I like that version.
Listen, it wouldn't do us all like the same thing, but you're wrong.
Well, that's what I like. That was my Ghost Rider, so that's
like your Doctor Who.
That's my Ghost Rider, so whatever. I don't mind. To be honest, I've not had access to that original run of Ghost Rider, and it was the problem with the original run of Ghost Rider is very all over the place as well, like tone-wise. It's like, is it a superhero book? Is it a horror book? No, it's a superhero book. Maybe it's not. Maybe
I mean everything as well.
Yeah,
Marvel Presents.
Yeah, it's just like it was all over the show. It was all over the show, so I couldn't really get into it. I know later in the run it gets more kind of they ground the tone a bit more, but for a while it's just not good. The Punisher, Frankencastle, which features, he gets chopped up by Wolverine's son, and then the Legion of Monsters, all the characters we've been talking about, bring him back to life as a Frankenstein creature, Morbius specifically, and then he protects this underground monster metropolis in New York because they're being exterminated by this guy who's basically like a walking tank thing. But yeah, it's an amazing story. It sounds ridiculous, but it's actually really fun and really there's some quite heartfelt moments in there. And eventually it goes back to the kind of status quo of the Punisher as well. Legion of Monsters or the Howling Commandos, they're two kind of mini-series that you can look up. There's Howling Commandos of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well, which is a similar thing. But I think they're good. A few listener comments. So, a few friends of ours from
we have friends.
We do. So a couple of friends I've asked, do you have a favourite storyline, horror storyline or horror characters from Marvel that you like and you're fond of? Paul Meller has said that he says Immortal Hulk, big thumbs up.
I know that.
And I would agree.
Best Marvel book out there.
It is. It definitely is. Annette Wantling says, thanks to our son Hayden's Spider-Man session, we have all actually enjoyed the first two Marvel zombie runs. So Marvel Zombies. Also the Army of Darkness crossover. So Ash of the Evil Dead fighting the Marvel Zombies, which I've not read, but it sounds brilliant. And then on Twitter, I am Jack's Musings at I am Jack's Musings. I'm one of our biggest fans. He says, it's not an area that I'm knowledgeable about, so I'd have to say Marvel Zombies. So Marvel Zombies, quite a modern horror comic, but one of the bigger, more popular ones. Great. So I think we're done.
Nearly.
Oh gosh, what do you want to say?
DC Marvel.
Right.
DC or Marvel horror. DC, read the Batman Red Rain books with Dracula.
Red Rain. Red
Rain, Bloodstorm, and Batman Castle of the Bats, and Gotham by Gaslight.
There you go. Good. That's some good recommendations. So
Yeah,
Marvel
we're doing Marvel.
We're doing
aren't we?
Marvel, but fair play.
I just thought, we mentioned Dracula and
yeah,
vampires
and
stuff
Swamp
and-
Thing. Obviously, we mentioned Swamp Thing is a good one.
But
to go.
the Red Rain trilogy.
Justice League Dark's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm dipping out of it, but
Dipping out of it.
The Batman Red Rain stuff, Kelly Jones artwork out there, just great.
Do it.
And
Just do it.
obviously Gotham by Gaslight with Jack the Ripper.
Perfect. So yeah, this is us. I think I've had a lot of fun. A lot of fun talking about some classic Marvel horror characters. Not talked about Marvel for a while, so it's nice to come back to the roots.
I'm glad I was here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you were, because I think it'd
Now
be quite...
put your claws on and
Okay. Chill out.
I've got a toilet.
No worries. Well, before we go, just where to find the podcast. So on Facebook, it's @SecretBalls. Twitter, Dan @Dan_balls. Instagram, SpiderDan Secret Balls, and the podcast is available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, many, many more. And don't forget to use the hashtag #PrepareForPrattle when you interact with us. Thank you, Den.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, so good. So good. Right, we'll see you later in the next edition of Shockphobia First.